Today I'm here with a very special guest, Lucian Tarnowski. He is the founding curator and executive director of Savannah, an open global society committed to working on humanity's greatest challenges. Savannah creates tools and resources for movements, communities, and multi-stakeholder initiatives to maximize their impact on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Savannah offers as a public good a community and collaboration platform purpose-built to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by increasing flows of knowledge, talent, and capital. In essence, Lucian, through Savannah, is stewarding the creation of a unified planet. Okay, Lucian, tell us about this intention to support the birth of the emerging Win for All system. What's your big idea?
Thank you, Maya. Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me here. The big idea is called the Unified Planet, which really is the story that I believe is what we're all working towards. You know, we've come from the age of the lone wolf, the age of separation, the age of me over we, and we're moving towards this like planetary chrysalis, this birthing of a new era of cooperation, of collaboration, of community, and so the Win for All system is not just possible; it's essential. It's what we need to create for us to actually live in balance and harmony with our natural world, with each other. And so that's really what the Unified Planet is about. And what we do is we bring people into 2030 where we've achieved the Unified Planet. We've delivered on the Sustainable Development Goals. We've created a planetary civilization. And it's from that place we invite people's creativity to remember how we did it, to tell their own story of how they contributed to this planetary civilization and how we reimagined every aspect of our society so that it works for all. And that's really the core essence of the Unified Planet. And we've got a number of ways that we do that I can talk about.
Yes, I was about to ask you, how do you bring people into the year 2030 after all of these things have been realized?
Yeah, so fun story to begin with on this. So let's go backwards in time before we go forwards. So backwards in time, it's 1961. JFK has just given the speech to Congress where he said, by the end of the decade, we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth. James Webb was running NASA at the time, and James Webb ran NASA all through the Apollo programs. And he basically knew it's 1961. He knew we didn't have a clue how to get a man on the moon. So he did this genius Jedi move to throw the biggest party NASA had ever thrown, inviting the brightest minds from across America to come to NASA to celebrate landing on the moon in 1961. And obviously all these people came into like the smartest room most of them, I'm sure, has ever stepped in. And we're like, I want to be part of bending the arc of history. This is my invitation. And sure enough, years later, we landed on the moon. And I believe that the fact that those individuals celebrated what they were going to do before they did it was a key part in how we landed on the moon. Because it starts with belief. It starts with like stating what you wish to do. And I am a big believer that the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. We should declare the future right now, declare what kind of future we wish to create. Because we're very empowered, you know, we're sovereign beings with all of this technology. And, you know, as Nikola Tesla said, that this decade, and Buckminster Fuller called it the design science decade, which is now the golden decade. This decade will be the decade where we completely redesign every aspect of our society so that it does work for all. And so what we've been doing, and it started with Davos last year, 2019, is we have been inviting people to come and remember the future and come to join celebrations in 2030. was a funny story where, I've been part of the World Economic Forum community. I've been to, I think, something like 100 plus World Economic Forum events, including Davos for the last 12 years. And so I knew the community there of these many world leaders, for better, for worse, and I wanted to make a splash because I was getting, like so many of us, really disenfranchised about the state of the world and the direction we're going. And so what I started to do is send this mailing list of over 1,000 attendees of Davos, started sending them emails from the future, sharing that it's a planetary civilization and we've delivered on the SDGs, and inviting them to come and celebrate as themselves in 2030, where to attend this gathering, to attend this celebration, you need to attend having contributed your dharma, your purpose to this mission. And it was a very unusual party, and I knew it was the ingredients for something good. But sure enough, after we opened the doors at 9 p.m. and we had people queuing all the way down the staircase, outside the building, around the block. It was like one of the most attended gatherings of that year. And we had world leaders come and do future casts where they speak for 3 to 5 minutes about how we delivered on this change. And so it was a very powerful way to give people more possibility, like to expand their horizons of what's possible. And what we know about choices is when we have more choices to be able to select from, we're far more likely to make the right choice. But in the present moment, we're so stuck in this kind of quagmire of like challenges, of wicked problems, that it's very difficult to see past them. And so when you start with a very crowded canvas of interconnected, interdependent challenges, it can be really paralyzing. And so what we wanted to do is put people into a space of creativity and play. And so that's where we start with this blank canvas of it's 2030, we did it, now let's remember how we did it. And we work backwards from there. And so since that original gathering in Davos, we threw another one this year, and then we've thrown these 2030 celebrations in all over the world, from Burning Man to Costa Rica to dinners here before Planet Home, and taken now thousands of people into this immersive experience of the world in 2030, from where we help people remember what they did when they grow up. The last time most adults were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, was when they were a child. Why do we stop asking that question, So.
Yes. So just to recap, I'm looking at these things that you shared at that party in Davos first, with the ideas, and that was that this is our golden decade. We're here to remember the future, to include and transcend, and move from me to we. We don't predict the future, we achieve it. The cooperation outperforms competition. Green is the new gold. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, well, I really believe this is we're living in the most important decade in the history of the planet. This is it cannot be underestimated, the amount of change that's happening. And there's this, I've been calling it the trident, particularly in America, but all around the world. We've got, number one, we've got deep race issues, we've got gender issues, and we've got environmental trauma that we need to overcome. And so we need to go inwards first and recognize like who we are as individuals, and then who we are and how we show up with our communities. And we need spaces to do that. And so green is the new gold is part of these 10 memes that we put out in Davos this year. And I sent these 10, we kind of crowdsourced memes, which are essentially like powerful ideas, powerful words for this decade, crowdsourced these together and then shared them with about 4,000 attendees at Davos. And they got picked up. People started to share them. People started to call this the golden decade. The New York Times picked it up, saying that the revolution comes to Davos. And it was just it was a kind of fun, playful way of saying, how can we use language as spells, essentially, as a way to literally spell the future we wish to create? Because language is so important. Our choice of words is so important. And so that's where that whole idea came from.
So then it continues on to say, back to soil and soul, we are nature, all in for all of life. These are really beautiful seeds to have planted for this golden decade. I would love to put this up on our website somewhere, just for our community to see. But tell me a little bit more about what the actual action items are now that you're taking with Savannah Foundation, and the Unified Planet.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so Savannah really was created as think of it as a planetary innovation ecosystem. So we've been just looking at ways that we can support the growing ecosystem around systems change, around those that have got to the point of saying, we don't need to tweak what we have. We need to fundamentally redesign every aspect of our society. And so we're looking at how we can provide more the connective tissue and optimize the flow of resources around that ecosystem. And so in response to that, we launched on Earth Day this year, we launched the Unified Planet, which ultimately is the goal is to return to community, to create, if you like, almost like a distributed United Nations, but instead of connecting countries, which frankly are failing us right now, connecting communities around the world that are working on local solutions to planetary challenges. And we really see the need for like new planetary scale organizations that are being led by communities all around the world. And so that's the question, that's the inquiry we've been approaching this with. And so fundamentally, the Unified Planet is a story. It's a unifying narrative for what we're looking to achieve by 2030. And the way we've thought about Unified Planet is really three pillars. We call it the three Ps. So players, places, and play. So firstly, players. So we launched this game where we bring together subject matter experts around particular topics, like archetypal leaders of systems change. And we pick topics like acupuncture spots. And so topics we've chosen so far, we started with sound for health, then we went to food for health, then we went to community impact, then we did a game on intergenerational leadership based on 7th generation principle, then we did one on planetary commons, and now we've got a whole roadmap of games. And really our objective with the players is to identify who are the leaders of our time of systems change, and how can we bring them together to apply collective intelligence? Because the one thing we know for sure is to get us through this like eye of the needle of this decade, to kind of rise to the challenge of multiple challenges at the moment, we need to create a human hive mind. We need to bring the planet's best talent together, applied around these areas of systems change. And so that's what we set out to do with players, is how can we create almost like a Premier League of planetary solutions. Places we recognized is like the oldest strategy there is. You know, since time began, the Templars, the Masons, religious organizations, monastic organizations, they've created this network of physical spaces for people to meet and gather. It's so important that we come together and we share space. And so we believe one of the kind of really obvious strategies here is to create this network of what we're calling planetary embassies, physical spaces that gather people together around transformation. And that's what we've been prototyping here at Savannah House, which you've been to. It's amazing, iconic house in the heart of San Francisco. It's the house that was built on top of the well of the Ohlone people, those indigenous to this area that we honor. And so it's the oldest gathering place in the whole of the Bay Area. And then William Filmer built the house. He's the president of the Golden Gate Bridge project. So the Golden Gate Bridge was actually conceived here in this house. So it's this incredible history. I often share when we hosted 3,000 people here from over 1,000 organizations just in the first 6 months that the doors opened. And I'd often introduce people to this space saying this is an icon of the past, a relic of the future, and a portal for the present. And it's, playing with time, essentially. And these physical spaces are places to gather people together for individual transformation, collective transformation, and planetary transformation. And so what we're seeing is there's a need right now to create this decentralized network to connect all of these different community spaces that are popping up, already exist, to connect them together as part of this unifying narrative. And so that's what we're looking at, ways that we can connect the dots and connect these lighthouses, these oases of hope, essentially, to connect them together so that we can, really bring the band back together, and create this, unstoppable team. My hope is that we could have at least 1 million people connected, working together as part of this planetary hive mind, playing this game on what could be best described as the Earth shot. We had the moon shot, now we've got the Earth shot, which is this goal by 2030 to create this system, win for all system. And then the final piece is the game itself. It's the play. I really believe that to get through this time, we need to come back to our childlike innocence, our inner child. And the more we can be in a place of play and creativity and having fun together and building community, I think that's exactly the ingredients we need to rise to the challenge of the challenges we face, whether they be coming from AI, whether they be coming from environmental destruction, species loss, health, education, etc. There's so many systemic challenges that we face. And just like Buckminster Fuller concluded that we need a new world game, we're looking at what way could a game be utilized to bring teams of 12 people together to work collaboratively on solutions. So that's what you think about it as, like combining people, places, and gameplay. Combine that together, and that's really what the Unified Planet is about.
That's just brilliant. You brought me a little bit to tears when you were talking about that, because it is, I don't like to reference time, but the present moment is where we really need to step up. And Genesis Consortium, which is the alliance that Mayfield and SOSV has just created to bring resources to invest in human and planetary health, is really truly in alignment with this idea you have for Unified Planet, bringing all the stakeholders, as I like to call, together just to do this Earth shot. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing in getting this news story out there and engaging people. Wow. So Lucian, your own transformation, I mean, how did these develop in your heart and mind?
Well, honestly, I got to a place where I was incredibly lucky to the parents I was born to. My mother was kind of like a Catholic mystic and an incredible mother, a photographer, and spent her life working with, those less fortunate. And she was an incredible role model to me. My father was a real pioneer. He was born in 1929, was a prisoner of war in Poland, had the most brutal war experience, and started in the 50s doing adventure travel. He was starting a company, writing the first guidebooks long before Lonely Planet and things like that came. And he was writing the first guidebook for Bali, and he contracted polio. and he spent his life in a wheelchair as a result. He was paralyzed from the waist down. And in the 60s, he did a 100,000-mile overland expedition around the world in his wheelchair. And he teamed up with Baba Amte, who was the protege of Gandhi in India. And he created, they together created this incredible community called Anandvan, which means Forest of Bliss. And it's the world's largest community around leprosy and disability. And so fast forward my journey, I started going to India most years since I was 9, excuse me, and would travel around the world with my father looking at community solutions. And so I traveled to like 70 countries looking at communities. And I was almost like raised, my father was such a kind of polymath and so aware of the issues that we're going to face in our lifetime, that he gave me a really deep education around systems change. And so I took on the running of the foundation when I was 18 and started getting really involved in female empowerment. I raised money to start a school training blind girls IT skills, and started to see how the power of when you economically empower an individual, what effect that can have on their community. And that led me into online communities and virtual learning. And I spent best part of a decade running a company that was doing virtual communities, helping companies share knowledge, creating virtual learning environments, and particularly around solving challenges. And we supported 20,000 veterans transitioning from the military into civilian jobs, and communities for companies like GE, Genentech, Lockheed Martin, Mercer, the various public health communities, for example. And then honestly, what happened was I had a very difficult year 3 years ago when started off with my mother dying from cancer, and 2 weeks later, my stepmother at 30 years dying unexpectedly, 2 days before my mum's funeral. And then my former wife nearly didn't make it through for the birth of our daughter a few months later. And it was like one of those moments where my whole world was completely shaken. And, I had recognized that I'd built up this great network with the World Economic Forum, being part of the Young Global Leaders community. And I recognized like I wasn't rising to my own, what I felt was being asked of me. And so I made a vow, and I committed to live my life in service and to do whatever I feel called to do in service of planetary transformation. Because as a new father, you mentioned stakeholder. The stake in being a stakeholder of this planet was like smashed into earth. I'm here, and I wish to live my life as a great ancestor. With raising a daughter who's here on a mission. I was like, this is a time where we need to transform this world in every way. So often I'd seen in Davos that, if where we need to go is north and where the planet is going is south, so much of what is being worked on with the existing paradigm, even with the SDGs, is taking us from, south to southwest. It's tweaking the existing paradigm, the existing system. And I started to realize that, the whole system is a house of cards. And I'm without a shadow of doubt, know it's coming down. So I was like, okay, well, how do we avoid it being violent when it comes down? Well, we need alternative systems. We need to return to community. And I know that we've got this unfair cooperative advantage that for more than 99% of humanity's history, we've organized ourselves through communities around the Dunbar number. And if we can return back to that, kind of back to the future, but these really empowered, technology-enabled communities where we're really living in harmony with each other and in harmony with our natural world, that's the ingredients that we need. And I feel so deeply honored to be, in this, serving serving this and, you know, playing whatever role is there to be played, you know, how to recognizing that, you know, at the end of the day, we're just storytellers telling a better story.
That's right. And I wanted to go back to this notion of the win for all system. Can you explain it so that we leave this conversation with everybody wanting to be a part of the win for all system?
Yeah. Well, you know, the nature of the current system is it's like a winner takes all system, and it's a system where, you know, just take the venture model for example. It's like, let's say 100 companies get funded. Typically, even the way the venture model works is it's the winner and then maybe the next three organizations take the vast majority of the value, and then there's this whole long tail of organizations that don't get through, and that's just highly inefficient with resources. The amount of duplicated resources, the amount of work that's done that's just duplicative work, purely for profit maximization, is crazy. And so what we're thinking about is, how do we flip the whole model to create a system that is designed for cooperative advantage, to prove that cooperative advantage outperforms competitive advantage, and create what's been called an omni-win world, where when we create when we're in a system as it is now, where we've got competitive dynamics, when we apply that with things like AI, when we apply it to like automated weapons, it creates a self-determinating system. Daniel Schmachtenberger is a great person to look at his work around this area. But it's got to a point where our very system is our biggest existential threat to our own survival. Mm. And so that's why I started this conversation with saying that it's not just a nice thing. I'm not talking about some utopia or some, like, you know, illusionary world. No, it is absolutely essential that when we think about the purpose-led economy and wholesale systems change, it's essential that we're designing it with a win-for-all model. And by that, I'm not just talking human-centric, which we've kind of come from for so long. It's like truly planetary-centric. We need to expand our horizons of what we include in our decision-making. And what we've been aspiring to, because, you know, from a leadership perspective, you know, take America, we've got the best politicians money can buy. You know, politics is for sale. The presidency is for sale. And that's unacceptable. You know, great civilizations of the past would turn in their grave to see what we're currently doing. You know, that's from a leadership perspective. But from a resources perspective, we need to live in balance with nature. You know, we're using more resources than the earth can replenish, and we're living in an unsustainable system, and that's only going to come and create a kind of cataclysmic crash unless we can, in parallel, design new systems and really focus on civilization prototyping at the community level. Civilization prototyping to a point where we actually have tried and tested different approaches. You know, so one example of a win-for-all system is in the Unified Planet game. We've got one of the principles is the 100x principle, which is that the minimum you can earn from the game and the maximum is tied to each other, and it's 100 times delta. So just to illustrate, if the minimum you can earn is, let's say, $6 an hour, kind of a almost like a universal basic income level, the maximum will be $600 an hour. Now that might sound a lot, but in nature you see similar deltas, similar spectrums. And all I'm saying is, when you compare that to the existing system, where 7 men own more than 50% of the world's population, you've got a pretty stark comparison. So what we're suggesting is we need to be audacious. We need to have humble audacity, And we need to look at these ways where we can design new incentive mechanisms for cooperation, for us to tie the interests of those that can contribute the most to society and be celebrated as heroes for doing so, with those that are that are new on the journey and not yet contributing as much to the collective, but still on the journey and still should be respected and able to live a dignified life. So I think there's what I have seen from bringing together hundreds of people to speak about the future. I know that, number one, nobody knows what's happening. It really is a collective vision, and two, it's beyond our wildest imagination. Like, what we will deliver in this decade is beyond anything we can currently conceive of. In the same way as, like, if we ask our grandparents what holograms were, they would be like, what are you talking about? There's going to be an entire language created of things we couldn't even comprehend of, delivered this decade. And, the thing that I think is most powerful in terms of how we show up is to have childlike faith that we've already done it, to know that the future, to know that this is why we're here, and using that anchor point of the future as a way to make choices in every moment, being like, how can I show up to deliver on that vision of the future? And that's what I believe it is to be like an agent of change, like here showing up, making choices on how can we deliver a planetary civilization in harmony with all life.
That's a really beautiful way to close. Thank you, Lucian. It was wonderful to hear your message today. I hope that our audience and the wider community will take note of this very important work that you're doing. So we'll talk to you soon and look forward to working together along with the Genesis Consortium and our SOSV and IndieBio. Let's work toward a unified planet.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maya. An honor to be here with you today and to be on this team with you. And the band really is back together.
Yes. I love that note, the band, bringing the band together. Let's bring back the band.
Yeah, exactly. It's why we're here. It's like, I think that's the job that needs to get done, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun.